For the past month, everything in my life had been going surprisingly well. In fact, I couldn't remember the last time things had felt this good. Then yesterday happened. Now, lying on my bed and staring at the ceiling, I was struggling to understand how everything had gone wrong so quickly. Part of me wanted to blame my parents, but another part kept reminding me that they probably had their reasons. Both of my parents worked in emergency services. Dad was a firefighter, while Mom worked as a police officer. When I was younger, they arranged their shifts so that one of them was almost always home. I never really questioned it. Having a parent around had simply been normal to me. That changed when I turned 13. They decided I was old enough to handle being alone for a few hours, particularly in the evenings or on weekends. They gave me strict rules to follow, and whenever their shifts meant they wouldn't be home at night, they arranged for me to stay with a trusted family friend who lived nearby. Maybe some people would have considered that too much responsibility for a 13-year-old. For me, though, it taught me independence. And as I got older, I began discovering things about myself that neither of my parents had expected. I was almost 16 when one of those discoveries completely changed my world. My parents had always pushed me toward the sports they thought boys should enjoy. Football was their favorite choice for me, and swimming was another activity I was naturally good at. But then I discovered hockey. I hadn't even planned on watching a game that day. I was simply taking a shortcut through the town's sports park when I noticed a match taking place on one of the fields. Curiosity made me stop. The players looked around my age, maybe slightly older, but this was nothing like the tame version of hockey we'd played at school. The game was fast, aggressive, and chaotic. Players crashed into each other, fought for every inch of ground, and somehow seemed to enjoy every second of it. I was hooked. When the match ended, I approached one of the adults who appeared to be organizing things. "How do I join?" He looked at me for a moment before answering. "Sorry, kid. They don't have mixed teams. The girls are playing next. Their coach is going to be busy, though. See those women over there in the red and white jerseys? Talk to their coach after the game." "Thanks," I said quietly. I walked away, already feeling embarrassed. It wasn't the first time someone had mistaken me for a girl. I was skinny, had a naturally soft appearance, and hadn't developed physically like most boys my age. Even my relatively short hair didn't always help. From a distance, people regularly assumed I was a girl. I was used to correcting them, or simply letting the mistake pass. This time, I decided not to say anything. Instead, I stayed and watched the girls' match. And that's when I realized something else. They were even more intense. Anyone who believed girls were naturally gentle or harmless had clearly never watched them play competitive hockey. They attacked every play with incredible determination, and the referees seemed to have twice as much work to do because of all the fouls. I couldn't stop watching. By the time the game ended, I had completely forgotten about speaking to the coach. Or maybe I hadn't forgotten. Maybe I simply couldn't bring myself to do it. I was a boy. As far as I knew, boys didn't ask to join girls' teams. Even if everyone at the field seemed convinced I was something else. By the time I arrived home, Mom was already there. Dad had started his shift at 8 that morning, while Mom had finished hers around noon. It was one of those rare days when our schedules actually lined up, and I was genuinely happy to see her. I knew it wouldn't last long, though. After being awake for most of the night, Mom would spend a few hours at home before finally heading upstairs to sleep. The following Saturdays, I found myself returning to the sports park whenever I could. I had become strangely invested in the hockey matches. Some weekends there was a game, while other weekends I showed up for nothing. It took me 3 visits before I finally noticed something obvious. One of the teams always seemed to have nearly the same group of players. When they weren't there, I eventually figured out that they must have been playing away. Slowly, the faces around the field became familiar. Most of them were parents, but there were also a handful of teenagers who seemed to be around my age. During one match, a girl standing nearby suddenly spoke to me. "Why don't you come to the away games?" I shrugged. "I don't have a ride." She pointed toward the field. "That's my sister taking the long corner over there. I get to come to most of the matches, unless Dad is working or away. When that happens, she takes the team minibus to the away games." She looked at me. "Couldn't your mom drive you?" "No. I've got a younger brother." He has music lessons every Saturday morning, so Mom takes him. That was enough to start a conversation. We spent most of the second half talking while keeping an occasional eye on the game. Somehow, the entire time passed without either of us introducing ourselves properly. I didn't know her name. She didn't know mine. It was strange, but neither of us seemed bothered by it. The next home match was when I saw her again, and without realizing it, that was the day everything began to change. The visiting team was running late, so everyone was standing around waiting. The temperature had dropped sharply, and winter seemed to be arriving earlier than usual. Thankfully, we'd managed to avoid the rain during the previous matches. The girl turned toward me. "If they don't show up soon, do you want to hang out?"
Sure.
I didn't hesitate. I liked talking to her. She was easygoing, cheerful, and somehow much more welcoming than most of the girls at my school. "So, what do you want to do?" I asked. She thought for a moment. "There's that new shopping center outside town, near the canal. I've heard they've got some really nice clothing stores." My stomach tightened. That was the moment I realized what she thought I was. She thought I was a girl. For some reason, the realization made me nervous. I had been mistaken for a girl countless times, but this felt different. I actually wanted to spend time with her, and I didn't want our friendship to begin with me hiding something. If we were going to hang out, she deserved to know the truth. "Sounds fun," I said. I took a breath. "By the way, my name's Richard." She smiled. "I'm Ashley." Then her expression changed. It took a few seconds before the meaning of my name seemed to register. "Sorry?" She looked confused. She hadn't misheard me. I gave her an awkward smile. "You heard me right." Her face slowly turned red as she realized her mistake. Oh, I knew exactly what she was thinking. She had assumed I was a girl. "Don't worry about it," I told her. "It happens all the time." "You don't mind?" She hesitated before asking the question that was clearly bothering her. "I mean, do you actually want to be a girl?" I shook my head.
No.
"I don't care that you made the mistake. I've been dealing with it for years, so I'm pretty used to it. Most of my friends go to school with me, so they already know what I look like. It's mainly strangers who get confused." Before she could say anything else, an announcement suddenly came over the speakers. The match had been officially canceled. The other team's minibus had gotten a puncture. Ashley looked at me. I looked back at her. For the first time, neither of us had any idea what would happen next. With the match canceled, I suddenly had several empty hours to fill before lunch. I was wondering what I could possibly do when Ashley turned toward me with a mischievous little smile. "So, do you still want to check out that new shopping center?" I stared at her. I was surprised she had asked again, especially now that she knew I was a boy. Somehow, though, I found myself agreeing before I had time to overthink it. No one was home anyway, so I didn't need to call and explain where I was going. Ashley quickly found her mom and told her where we were headed. A short while later, we were sitting together on the local bus. I expected the journey to be awkward. Instead, we talked and talked. And somehow, we never seemed to run out of things to say. I became so absorbed in our conversation that I barely noticed the journey. Before I knew what was happening, we had arrived at the shopping center. A few minutes later, I found myself standing inside a changing room with Ashley, holding several tops and skirts. I froze. Ashley had started changing, but when she noticed how quiet I'd become, she looked over and immediately saw the panic on my face. I quickly turned away. The problem was that the changing room had mirrors everywhere. "What's wrong?" she asked. I can't do this."
Oh, sorry.
"I forgot." She started to gather her things. "I'll go." "You don't have to." I looked at her. She smiled reassuringly. "It would actually be nice to know what you think." I couldn't believe what I was hearing.
She knew I was a boy.
She knew exactly what she'd assumed about me earlier. Yet she was completely comfortable with me being there. I didn't understand it. Ashley tried on the first outfit and looked at herself in the mirror. I shook my head.
No.
"The top doesn't really work." She laughed. I knew it wasn't right. "What about this one?" She handed me another top. I looked at it carefully. "Yeah, that one works better." She turned toward the mirror and nodded. You're right. Something strange happened after that. The awkwardness gradually disappeared. Ashley never pressured me to try anything. She simply asked for my opinions, and before long, I found myself giving them without feeling embarrassed. What surprised me most was that she didn't buy anything from that first store. Instead, we moved on to another one. Soon we were wandering between the racks, pulling out clothes, judging them, laughing at some of the ridiculous designs, and discussing which ones actually looked good. Somewhere along the way, I caught myself enjoying it. I never understood why strangers so often mistook me for a girl. Sometimes, privately, I'd even wondered what it would feel like to actually dress like one. But I never seriously considered trying it. There was no way I could do something like that at home. If my parents ever caught me experimenting with women's clothes, I couldn't imagine how they'd react. But here, everything felt different. Ashley already treated me as though being around girls' clothing was completely normal for me. Maybe I could take it one step further. Maybe I could finally find out what it actually felt like. And if I hated it, I could simply change back. This might be my only opportunity. I picked up a top and held it against myself. What do you think? Ashley looked up from the rack she was searching through. She examined the top for a moment before giving me a small nod.
Yeah.
That could actually work. I looked down at it. For the first time, the thought of trying it on didn't seem quite as impossible as it had a few minutes earlier. Let's find something that goes with it, Ashley said. I followed her through the racks, still wondering what on earth I was doing. I had a perfectly normal life. My parents loved me. I had friends at school. I wasn't some social outcast, and my grades were decent. I even played football for my year group. There was absolutely no reason for me to be enjoying this so much. And yet, I was. What about this? Ashley called from a few racks away. She held up another piece of clothing. I walked over and looked at it.
Yeah.
That's not bad. I took my top and held it beside the item she had chosen. Let's see what they look like together. Ashley had picked out a few things for herself too, so we headed toward the changing rooms. The booths in this store were surprisingly spacious. They were much larger than the cramped ones we'd encountered in the previous shop, and far bigger than the changing rooms in the stores where I normally bought my clothes. We stepped into the same booth. This time, neither of us spent much time thinking about how strange the situation was. We were both busy changing, which somehow made everything feel more ordinary. Once I'd finished, I looked at Ashley. What do you think? I deliberately avoided looking at the mirror. Turn around. I hesitated. Go on. I finally glanced up. Ashley smiled. Oh yeah.
It's really you.
What did you do to my hair? Nothing major. I just tidied it up. When you took your sweater off, it got all messy. I didn't change your hairstyle. She pointed toward the mirror. Have a look yourself. I slowly turned. The person staring back at me was a boy with a strangely feminine appearance, or at first glance, almost a girl. There was no mistaking the lack of a feminine figure, but the overall impression was startling. I moved slightly to one side. The reflection copied me perfectly. I moved again.
So did she.
I stared at the mirror for several seconds. It really was me, and somehow, it felt like it was me in more ways than one. Before I could process the thought, Ashley and I were already changing back. We returned the clothes to the sales assistant near the changing area and left the store. Outside, we bought a couple of bottles of cola and sat on a bench. I needed a moment. My heart was still beating far too quickly. Ashley didn't say anything. She simply sat beside me, sipping her drink and watching me. After a few minutes, she finally decided I looked recovered enough. Better? A little. I stared down at my bottle before quietly admitting, I look like a girl. Ashley gave me a puzzled expression. Sorry, but you looked like one before we even went shopping. I sighed. What exactly did you do to my hair? I told you. I just made it neat. She smiled. When you took your sweater off, your hair got messy. That's all.
Oh.
She took another sip. So, did you have fun? Eventually. I laughed nervously. I was terrified at first. You weren't once you stopped thinking about it. I couldn't really argue with that. So, what happens now? Ashley shrugged. That's entirely up to you. Then she suddenly frowned.
Wait.
Don't you need to tell your mom you won't be home for lunch? Good point. I pulled out my phone and called Mom. She didn't seem bothered at all. In fact, she sounded pleased that I was out enjoying myself. She simply reminded me to be home by 6. When I hung up, I turned to Ashley with a grin. 6 o'clock.
Great.
Food or another shop? I laughed. I was beginning to wonder whether Ashley had some kind of built-in shopping obsession. One more shop. Unfortunately, the next store wasn't much use. Neither of us found anything we liked, and the entire shopping center turned out to be somewhat disappointing. Several of the units were still empty, making the place feel unfinished. At least there was a Chinese buffet. While we were eating, Ashley suddenly asked, "So, do you like boys or girls?" I immediately looked around. Had anyone heard her? Nobody seemed to be paying attention. "I'm only 15, I muttered, feeling my face heat up. "I've never even been out with anyone. What about you?" "Neither have I." That genuinely surprised me. Ashley was confident, attractive, and seemed like the kind of girl who would have people asking her out constantly. But that wasn't exactly what I had wanted to know. I'd wanted to know whether she liked boys or girls. Unfortunately, the moment had passed. Still, she had accidentally given me an opening. "Do you want to see a movie after this?" She looked at me. "Are you asking me out?" Suddenly, all my confidence disappeared. I couldn't finish the sentence. I stared at my food and nervously pushed it around with my fork. Ashley reached across the table and took my hand. "I'd love to be your girlfriend." I looked up at her. "But we hardly know each other." She smiled. "We've watched a few hockey games together and spent the day shopping. That's already more than my parents knew about each other when they started dating." She laughed. "My dad first saw Mom in a pub. She was there with some coworkers and Dad was there with his friends. He liked the way she looked, and after spending most of the evening looking at each other, they went to a late movie." Her story made me smile. When we finished eating, Ashley insisted that we split the bill. I considered arguing, but honestly, I was relieved. I'd left home expecting nothing more than an afternoon at the sports park. I hadn't budgeted for shopping, lunch, and a movie. At the cinema, we followed the same arrangement. We each bought our own ticket, but I bought her a drink, and we shared an overpriced bag of sweets. I still couldn't understand how cinemas managed to charge so much for candy. Maybe it was because they knew you had nowhere else to buy it. Being on a date for the first time was strange enough. Being on my first ever date made it even more intimidating. Ashley seemed confident about some things, but I soon discovered she wasn't entirely sure how dating was supposed to work either. She lived on the opposite side of town, so when we got off the bus, I decided to walk her home. Her house wasn't nearly as different from mine as I'd expected. I glanced around. Nobody seemed to be watching from the windows. I leaned forward, intending to give her a quick kiss goodbye. Ashley laughed. I immediately stopped. For a moment, I thought I'd completely misread the situation. Then she grabbed my hand and gently turned me back toward her. Her expression softened as she touched the side of my face.
"Sorry.
That came out wrong." She smiled. "You just look so nervous." Then she whispered, "Please kiss me." I didn't need to be asked twice. We moved closer and kissed. It wasn't dramatic or passionate. It was soft and tentative, almost like neither of us wanted to break the moment. When we finally separated, Ashley was smiling. I could see the happiness in her eyes. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like an engine. "Wow," she whispered. I wanted to kiss her again, but I didn't want to push things too far. She seemed happy, and I didn't want to ruin it. As she reached for the front door, she turned back. "Are you doing anything tomorrow?" "If I finish my homework tonight, then no." "Why?"
She grinned.
"I finished mine Friday. I was thinking about that outfit you liked." My heart immediately started racing again. My mind filled with questions. It took me several seconds to answer. "Do you have a pen and some paper?" Ashley looked at me strangely, but eventually searched through her bag and handed them over. I quickly wrote down my instant messenger address.
"Here."
She took the paper. "I'll be online later. I think we need to talk." Her expression suddenly became worried. "Don't worry," I added quickly. "I'm not angry, and I'm definitely not planning to dump you." Her face relaxed. She leaned forward, gave me a quick kiss, and disappeared inside. I walked home feeling completely confused by everything that had happened. But beneath the confusion was something else. I couldn't stop smiling. When I arrived home, I was surprised to find Mom still awake. It was almost 6 and she normally went to bed around 4 so she could sleep before her next shift. "Have fun?" she asked as I hung up my coat. "We went into town and saw a movie." I sighed. Sometimes having a police officer for a mother was inconvenient. "Ashley. She's a girl I met a while ago." Mom's eyebrows shot upward. "You have a girlfriend?" I felt myself blush. "Yes, Mom." Then I smiled. "And stop interrogating me. I didn't break too many laws today." She laughed. It was an old family joke. Whenever Mom started sounding too much like she was on duty, we'd remind her that we'd managed to get through the day without breaking too many laws. I just hoped that spending time in a women's changing room didn't somehow count. "Do you need anything before I go to bed?" Mom asked.
No. Shoo.
"You should have gone to sleep hours ago." She smiled. "I'm not that old. And Dad'll be home soon anyway. You'll have to tell me all about Ashley later." I don't remember meeting her. Mom headed toward the door. "Sleep well, Mom." I stood up and watched her leave. For the first time that day, I was alone with my thoughts. And there was one thing I couldn't stop thinking about. Tomorrow. I've got homework to finish if I'm going to be allowed out tomorrow. Mom stopped halfway up the stairs and dramatically put a hand to her chest. "Homework? And you're actually doing it before the last minute." I laughed. "Wow," she continued. "This girl is already having a positive influence on you." "Very funny, Mom." I followed her upstairs, then disappeared into my room and sat down at my computer. The assignment was for English literature. We had been asked to write a short story inspired by The Secret Life of Walter Mitty by James Thurber. I much preferred writing on a computer. If I made a mistake, I could simply delete it and carry on. Writing everything by hand always made me feel like every mistake was permanent. I hadn't even gotten properly started when a notification appeared on my screen. Ashley was trying to add me to her instant messaging contacts. I accepted immediately. Within seconds, a conversation window appeared. "Ashley, did I upset you?" "Me no. You just caught me completely off guard." I paused before typing the next part. "Me. I've been thinking about today all the way home, and I still don't understand it." "Ashley. Understand what?" "Me. Why strangers always think I'm a girl. And why trying those clothes didn't feel as strange as it should have." There was a short pause. "Ashley, I don't know. But why does it matter?" "Me. It doesn't feel normal." I leaned back in my chair. "Me. I don't know any other guys who get mistaken for girls. And I don't understand how you can even want to date me." Her reply came quickly. "Ashley, I've never liked anyone before you." I stared at the screen. "Me nobody?" "Ashley, nobody. Not a boy or a girl." Then another message appeared. "Ashley, but when I met you at the hockey game, I couldn't stop looking at you." I didn't know how to respond. None of this made sense to me. Yet Ashley seemed completely certain about how she felt. Meanwhile, my homework remained almost untouched. Maybe Walter Mitty had actually figured something out. Perhaps there was nothing wrong with escaping into a fantasy world once in a while. Considering everything that had happened to me lately, I couldn't imagine anyone having a stranger life. An idea suddenly occurred to me. Maybe I could base my assignment around a schoolboy who secretly became a spy. That sounded ridiculous enough. Where would he be sent? Russia?
No.
That felt too predictable. The Middle East. That's it.
Iran.
I started imagining an absurd story about a teenage student being recruited for a secret mission when another message popped up. "Ashley. Hey, are you still there?"
Me. Sorry.
I was trying to understand what you said and figure out my homework at the same time. "Ashley, what homework?" "Me. English Lit. We've got to write a story based on one we were given." "Ashley, which one?" "Me. Walter Mitty." "Ashley, we did that a few weeks ago. I think it's one of those standard school assignments." "Me. So, what fantasies are you planning?" "Ashley, a schoolboy spy in Iran sounds pretty good." "Me. That's not bad." "Ashley, Why not make the entire school a training academy for teenage spies? I laughed. Me. That's even more unbelievable. Ashley, exactly. I shook my head.
Me nah.
Too ridiculous. Anyway, what time tomorrow? Ashley, my family has an early Sunday lunch. My parents like everyone to be there. How about 2? Me. 2 works. I've got football at 9, though. I'll tell Dad about our plans in the morning. Ashley, is the match at your school?
Yeah.
Ashley, can I come watch? Me. Sure, if you want. Although having your mom drop you off might be awkward. Ashley, why? Me. If she sees me playing football with the boys, she might get confused. There was a pause. Ashley, oh right. I keep forgetting. I smiled. Ashley, was your mom already asleep when you got home? Me, no. She stayed up waiting to hear about my day. My phone call at lunch obviously made her curious. Me, when she finally went upstairs, she mentioned that she hadn't met you. Another message appeared. Ashley, you told her we were seeing each other?
Me, sorry.
It just slipped out. Ashley, messaging is terrible sometimes. You can't hear how someone means something. Me, I know. I was just surprised. Ashley, I'm glad she knows. Do your parents know? I hesitated. Me, Mom thinks you're a girl I met at hockey and went shopping with. I haven't told her your name or anything else. Ashley, what happens when she finds out? Me, I don't know. Hopefully nothing bad. Ashley, but how will she find out eventually? That question made me pause. Me, what if my voice changes? Or I start needing to shave? Ashley, oh, I hadn't thought about that. Me, every other guy on the football team has started shaving and their voices have changed. Mine can't be far behind. Then I typed the question I'd been afraid to ask. Me, will you still want to be with me when that happens? Her answer came almost immediately. Ashley, I've told you. I've never liked anyone before you. Ashley, it isn't just your appearance. It's the things you say, the way you act. You're still going to be the same person when puberty catches up with you. I smiled at the screen. Then another message appeared. Ashley, Mom's calling me for dinner. Me, will you be online later? Ashley, I'll be here. Me, I'll probably still be working on this story. Ashley, okay. I love you. I stared at those 3 words for a moment before typing my reply. Me, love you too. The moment I sent it, I sat back in surprise. I'd said it so naturally. There hadn't been any hesitation. After the excitement of the day finally began settling down, I returned to my homework. Something strange happened. The words started flowing. I'd always liked English, but whenever I had to write creatively, I often seemed to hit an invisible wall. Tonight, however, the ideas I'd been carrying around in my head suddenly appeared on the screen almost effortlessly. I just hoped the finished story actually captured enough of Walter Mitty's style. I became so absorbed in writing that I didn't hear Dad come home. I didn't even notice him until he appeared in my doorway. Hey, Rich. Dinner's in 10 minutes. I jumped. Sure, Dad. I barely looked away from the screen. I finished the paragraph I'd been working on, saved the document, and finally turned my chair around. I've nearly finished my English homework. Dad looked genuinely surprised. It's Saturday. Don't you normally leave your homework until Sunday after football? I've got plans after lunch tomorrow. You do? He frowned. I don't remember hearing anything about that. I told Mom earlier. Dad glanced toward the hallway. There wasn't a note. Of course there wasn't. Mom had gone to bed before Dad returned, and Dad would probably still be asleep when Mom woke up for her next shift. Because their schedules rarely lined up, my parents had developed a simple system. Whenever one of them needed to tell the other something, they wrote it in a notebook they kept in the kitchen. It was technically meant for days when their shifts meant they didn't see each other. Over time, though, it had simply become part of our family's routine. The notebook had gradually become part of our family's everyday routine. My parents used it to leave each other reminders, updates, and anything important they might otherwise forget. There was even a section where I could write down things I needed to tell them. That evening, Mom had stayed up later than usual, and it wasn't until she was about to head upstairs that she discovered the news about Ashley. Ashley? The girl I was with today. I'm going into town with her tomorrow. Dad immediately grinned. Is she your girlfriend? I felt my face warm.
Yeah.
Well done, son. Then Dad added, with absolutely no subtlety. Is she a bit of a looker? Dad. I rolled my eyes. I think she's really pretty. Unfortunately, the moment I said it, my mind flashed back to the changing room earlier that afternoon, and I blushed even harder. Dad apparently didn't notice, or simply didn't care. I'll see you at dinner, he called as he walked away. Food'll be ready in a few minutes. Sometimes Dad really didn't think before speaking. Mom was about to go to bed, and the last thing she needed was to be kept awake by another conversation. Thankfully, dinner was considerably less embarrassing than I'd feared. Dad didn't tease me nearly as much as I had expected. He did, however, fail to understand why instant messaging couldn't wait until after the dishes were done. Chores still need doing, he said firmly. Ashley will still be there when you're finished. I reluctantly did the washing up. Luckily, when I finally returned to my room, Ashley was still waiting. I honestly don't know how I managed to finish my homework that night. It was extremely late when I finally shut down the computer. In fact, Dad had already gone to bed. He noticed the light under my bedroom door and reminded me that it was time to sleep. Ashley had disappeared from the messenger about an hour earlier, but I remained awake, thinking. I kept coming back to the same question. Why hadn't I panicked when I'd tried on those clothes? I couldn't explain it. Eventually, exhaustion won. But sleep didn't come easily. Thoughts of Ashley kept circling through my mind, along with another question. What would she think when she saw me playing football? The next morning was a changeover day for Dad. His work schedule was unusual. He worked 2 days, followed by 2 nights, then had 4 days off. Because of that rotation, he'd only managed a short sleep overnight and would return to bed just before lunch so he could prepare for his 6 o'clock shift. That meant my afternoon plans worked out perfectly. I wouldn't be around while he was sleeping. As I walked toward school for the football match, I suddenly remembered something from our marathon conversation the night before. I'd never asked Ashley why she had been so interested in me trying on the girls' clothes. There hadn't been a good moment to bring it up. I'd have to ask her later. When our team came out of the changing rooms, I immediately spotted Ashley. She was wrapped up against the cold, waiting patiently on the sidelines. Having someone there specifically to support me was unusual. Then I heard her shout my name. Richard. My heart jumped. Her voice seemed to give me an extra burst of energy. We played well, and by the final whistle we'd secured a comfortable 3-1 victory. I immediately looked for Ashley. She was still there. I walked over to her, smiling. Thanks for coming. She smiled back. Then our lips met. The rest of my teammates immediately responded with loud wolf whistles. I could feel my face turning bright red, but neither of us pulled away immediately. When we finally separated, I laughed nervously. Thanks for coming. It was fun. I paused. And yeah, it's probably a good thing your parents didn't come with you. She laughed. How did you get here? I cycled. She looked surprised. I think my parents were almost as surprised as you are. I haven't ridden my bike in ages. Dad had to raise the seat before I could even use it. I laughed. I walked. Will you still be here if I get changed quickly? Of course. She glanced down the road. It's mostly downhill on the way home, so it shouldn't take me nearly as long to get back. We shared one more quick kiss before I ran back toward the changing rooms. Most of the team had already finished showering, so I was able to get changed quickly. As I was pulling on my clothes, Robert looked over. So, who is she? A friend. Robert raised an eyebrow. Friends don't kiss like that. Before I could answer, Paul jumped into the conversation. Hey, Rich. Isn't Robert your friend? Robert glared at him. Shut it. Paul clearly wasn't interested in stopping. You know, I always thought you were gay. I ignored him. Maybe she's just a girlfriend of convenience. That did it. Something inside me snapped. I jumped to my feet and headed straight toward him. I was barely a meter away when Robert and Lee grabbed me. Lee was our captain, and when he spoke, everyone listened. We're supposed to be a team, he said firmly. There'll be no fighting. He looked directly at Paul. Paul, I really hope you were only joking. Paul immediately nodded. Of course. But even as I stepped back, I could feel the anger still burning inside me. And I knew this wasn't going to be the last time someone questioned me because of Ashley. Paul looked over at me. Hey man, sorry. He didn't sound particularly sincere, but I wasn't interested in arguing anymore. I pulled myself free from Robert and Lee and finished getting dressed. You seem to be in a hurry, Robert remarked as I grabbed my bag. Last one into the showers and first one out. I hesitated, then lowered my voice. I'm meeting Ashley. Before leaving, I turned toward him. Be honest, how many people think I'm gay? Robert's expression immediately changed. He didn't need to answer. His face told me everything. That many?
He sighed.
There've been rumors. People talk. But most of them don't say anything directly because you're popular on the pitch. You're one of our best players and nobody wants to get on your bad side. He nodded toward the exit. Now go before Ashley decides she's waited long enough and leaves. I hurried outside. Ashley was standing beside her bicycle, waiting for me. The second she smiled, some of the tension I'd been carrying seemed to disappear. But she immediately noticed something was wrong. What happened? What do you mean? Something changed when you came out of the changing rooms. I could see it in your face. I sighed. Someone made a comment about me being gay. He said you were just a girlfriend of convenience. Her expression hardened. You didn't fight him, did you? We started walking away from the school grounds. Almost. Oh, darling. She shook her head. It's not worth getting into a fight over. Then she looked at me seriously. I hope you know I really like you. I know. And you know I like you too. I kicked at a small stone on the pavement. I don't even know why it bothered me so much. I just hated hearing people say it. Ashley leaned closer with a teasing smile. Who knows? Maybe you're a lesbian. Don't rush me. I laughed despite myself. I'm still trying to understand everything that happened yesterday. And us. Okay. She squeezed my hand. Just remember that I'm pretty open-minded. We continued walking. So, what are you doing for lunch? Mom's working and Dad will be asleep. I was planning to go home, change, and grab something in town before meeting you. I thought so. She smiled. You could come to ours for lunch. Wouldn't you need to ask your mom? I already did. Before I came out, I asked if it was okay to invite you. She said there'd be plenty of food. I hesitated. But your mom thinks I'm a girl. Then just be yourself. She won't know. Unless you call me Richard. Ashley thought for a moment. Good point. She grinned. You look more like a Rebecca. I stared at her. Rebecca. Becky for short. I couldn't believe it. I'd literally just told her not to rush me, and within 60 seconds she'd given me a girl's name. Still, the invitation was tempting. With both my parents working different shifts, family meals were rare. A proper Sunday lunch was even rarer. Cooking a big roast for only 3 people seemed like a lot of effort. Fine. I pointed a warning finger at her. But don't call me Becky in front of my parents. She rolled her eyes. Obviously. When we reached my house, Dad was still awake. He opened the door, looked at Ashley, and immediately gestured toward the stairs. I assume you're going to get changed? I groaned. Dad laughed and disappeared into the lounge. A short while later, I came downstairs. Dad and Ashley were both smiling. It was nice meeting you, Mr. Head, Ashley said politely as she stood. I'm sure it won't be the last time. Dad looked far too pleased with himself. As we walked toward Ashley's house, she told me what they'd discussed. Mostly, Dad had been trying to learn more about her and her family. Somehow, neither of them had managed to embarrass me. That alone felt like a miracle. Dad had a habit of saying exactly the wrong thing at exactly the wrong moment. When we reached Ashley's house, her mother came out from the kitchen to greet us. Since she had no idea that Ashley and I were dating, she simply treated me as another friend. And because she believed I was a girl, there was no reason for her to object when Ashley invited me upstairs. Can we help with anything? Ashley asked. Why don't you two set the table? Dinner should be ready in about half an hour. The table looked enormous compared with the one at home. Then again, there were 5 people in the family, plus me. At home, there were only 3 of us. We finished setting everything up quickly. The moment we were done, Ashley grabbed my hand and pulled me upstairs. Once her bedroom door closed, we kissed. We'd barely settled down when her younger brother, Tony, shouted from downstairs, "Dinner's ready." I immediately realized we had a problem. We'd gotten carried away, and both of us looked rather disheveled. "Give us a minute," Ashley called back. I quickly disappeared into the bathroom while she tried to make herself look presentable. Somehow, we managed to reach the dining room looking innocent enough. "So, Becky," Caroline, Ashley's sister, asked, "are you thinking about joining the hockey team?" I'd already anticipated that question. "I've got exams in May, so I probably won't have much time." So you're the same age as Ashley," Mr. Thompson said. It was my first time meeting him. He seemed friendly and was clearly the kind of person who could keep a conversation going forever. Everyone seemed relaxed. Everyone except Tony.
He kept looking at me.
By the end of the meal, I was convinced he'd figured out something wasn't quite right. At one point, after I had been introduced as Becky, he'd even given me a knowing wink. On the bus afterward, I mentioned it to Ashley. "Nah," she said casually. "He just thinks you're attractive." I stared at her. "But he thinks I'm a girl." "Exactly."
She grinned.
"What did you think of him?" "He seemed nice. Although I completely lost track whenever he started talking about music." "That's not what I meant." She laughed. "Did you actually like him?"
"No."
I was genuinely confused. "Are you trying to set me up with him?" She laughed harder.
"No."
"Yesterday you told me you'd never dated anyone. I was just curious whether you might like both."
It took me a moment to understand.
"Even if I did, and I'm not saying I do, I'd never cheat on you." Then I turned the question around. "What about you?" She looked at me. "You." I sighed. "I meant boys or girls." "I don't know."
She thought about it.
"Like I said yesterday, I've never really been attracted to anyone before." Then she smiled. "I suppose I see you as Becky sometimes. But I also know you're Richard." That answer surprised me. I knew she mostly saw the feminine side of me, but hearing her acknowledge that there was still a difference between the person she saw and the person I actually was felt strangely reassuring. There was still something I needed to know. "So, why do you want me to get that outfit?" Finally, I'd asked the question I'd been carrying around since yesterday. Ashley shrugged. "You're a little bigger than me. If you tried on my clothes, you'd probably stretch them."
She paused.
"And I thought it might be fun if we went out together as two girls." She looked at me carefully. "Only if you're comfortable with it." I thought about it. "I think I am." Then I frowned. Which is weird. I don't actually want to be a girl. "Maybe you don't have to." That answer stayed with me. When we reached the clothing store, I was distracted enough that I barely noticed what was happening around me. Then I heard someone call my name. I looked up. Two girls from my English class were standing nearby. Sarah and Moira. I was holding a skirt. Without thinking, I quickly handed it to Ashley. I wanted to disappear. Ashley, however, had other ideas. "Why don't you introduce me?" I gave her a look.
There was no escaping now.
We walked over.
"Hi, Sarah."
"Hi, Moira." I gestured toward Ashley. "This is Ashley." "Ashley, these two are the people who stopped me from getting into too much trouble in English." Sarah smiled. "Is that your girlfriend?" "Robert said she was at the football match this morning." I nodded. Ashley slipped her arm through mine. Sarah and Moira smiled genuinely. There was no judgment. No awkward questions. Just two friends who seemed happy for us. Ashley returned the skirt to the rack, and the four of us left the store together. We spent the afternoon wandering around the main shopping area, talking, laughing, and generally enjoying ourselves. Ashley remembered to call me Richard whenever other people were around. Everything seemed completely normal. Until, just before we reached the bus station, a man carrying a clipboard approached us. "Hi, girls. Would you mind signing our petition against the proposed cuts to the fire service?" I froze for half a second. After everything that had happened with people constantly mistaking me for a girl, I decided not to correct him. I simply took the pen.
And signed.
By then, I had become so accustomed to people mistaking me for a girl that I usually just let it happen. Correcting strangers was often more embarrassing than simply ignoring the mistake. Ashley didn't react at all. I was fairly certain she still thought of me as Becky. Sarah and Moira laughed at first, then exchanged confused looks when I didn't correct the man. I deliberately stayed behind while they signed the petition. Then, when it was my turn, I quietly wrote Becky on the form. It felt strange. It was the first time I'd ever used that name in writing. Ashley noticed immediately, but Sarah and Moira were too busy talking to look back at the clipboard. So much for a normal date. We eventually reached the bus station. Ashley and I caught one bus, while Sarah and Moira took another that would bring them closer to their homes. "At least you didn't have to buy that outfit," Ashley said, giving me a reassuring squeeze. True. Are they always like that? Pretty much. I don't really see them outside English lessons. At school, I'm Richard and I mostly hang around with the guys. Ashley nodded. Are you doing anything next weekend? Dad starts a day shift next Saturday. I'm not sure what shift Mom will be working. My parents were actually planning to take me out for dinner Friday night. We don't get many chances to do that. Ashley smiled. Oh, I'll be 16. I looked at her. You didn't tell me. She shrugged. I've had other things on my mind. She paused. My parents are also encouraging me to get a Saturday job, so I'm not sure how much free time I'll have. Where are you thinking of applying? Tesco. They usually need extra staff before Christmas, so I'm hoping they'll be hiring. Sounds like a good plan. There was a mischievous glint in Ashley's eyes. I wondered what she was thinking. When's your birthday? The following Friday. I immediately copied her earlier expression. Why didn't you tell me? She laughed. Because you didn't ask. I smiled. Suddenly, I was glad I hadn't bought the outfit after all. That meant I could save a little more money and hopefully get Ashley something nice for her birthday. When we reached her house, we shared another long kiss. As she reached for the door, she looked back. Will you be online later? Of course. I headed home. When I arrived, both Mom and Dad were awake. Dad was getting ready for work. Did you have fun? Mom asked.
Yeah.
Ashley's great company. I paused. The only problem is that she really likes shopping. Mom laughed and guided me toward the lounge. I've got some news. I looked at her. What? I've been promoted. My eyes widened. You got the inspector's position? I already knew the answer from the look on her face. She nodded. Yes. Unless something major happens, I'll be moving on to a standard daytime schedule. I'll still have some weekends, but no more night shifts. That was fantastic news. Fixed daytime shifts were unusual in Mom's line of work, so this was a huge change for our family. Mom, can Ashley come to my birthday dinner? I quickly added, Dad has met her. He can tell you she's okay. Dad called from the other room. She's more than okay. Mom laughed. All right. If she comes Friday, I'll finally meet her. I grinned. Then Dad's voice suddenly echoed from downstairs. Richard, get down here. Now. The tone made my stomach drop. Dad wasn't someone who usually shouted like that. And when he did, it meant something was seriously wrong. I quickly typed BRB into the instant messaging window and went downstairs. When I entered the lounge, I stopped dead. Ashley was there, and sitting beside her were her parents. Oh. I tried to smile. I'm sure it didn't hide the terror on my face. I couldn't understand how they had found out. Ashley hadn't slipped up during my birthday dinner, and whenever I'd been at their house, everyone had called me Becky. Then I assume it's true, Mom said coldly. I looked at her. You've been pretending to be a girl around Mr. and Mrs. Thompson? You've been calling yourself Becky? I barely had time to answer. Answer the question, Richard. Yes. Mom's expression hardened. Since the day you met Mrs. Thompson, she believed you were a girl. I know. It would have been less embarrassing to correct her, I explained. Mom continued. And you used that misunderstanding to be allowed upstairs in Ashley's bedroom, even though she's not permitted to have boys in there. I didn't know how to respond. It wasn't an excuse. Dad stepped in. Richard, go to your room. We'll discuss this properly later. For now, you're grounded. I nodded. I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt anyone. I felt completely rejected. My parents had always seemed fair to me. Now, suddenly, it felt as though they didn't understand me at all. I still had no idea how Ashley's parents had discovered where I lived, or how they'd learned the truth. When I reached my room, the instant messenger window was flashing. I immediately typed, "Me, your parents are here. I'm grounded." A reply came quickly. "Ashley, your parents didn't look very happy." Me, "Do you think they'll stop us seeing each other?" Nothing. I stared at the screen. Me, "Ashley?" Then her response appeared. "Ashley, sorry. I was crying. Ashley, I love you so much." Me, "I love you too." Her next message hurt even more. "Ashley, but you still live with your parents. Until you go to university, you have to follow their rules." Me, "It's not fair." I could almost imagine her crying as she typed. "Ashley, I know it isn't." I stared at the words. Me, "Until things settle down, we'll have to stick to messaging." Me, "I'm sure they'll forget about it in a few weeks." A loud bang came from downstairs. "Ashley, sounds like my parents just left." Me, "I'm going offline, just in case mine come up here." Me, "I'll try to get back online later." "Ashley, I love you." Me, "I love you too." Disconnecting felt strangely devastating. I shut down the monitor and lay on my bed, waiting. With only 13 stairs between my room and the lounge, it didn't take long. The bedroom door opened. Both of my parents walked in. They looked more disappointed than angry. Dad finally spoke. "What were you thinking?" "I was having fun." "You think lying to people is fun?" I wasn't lying. I sat up. Ashley's parents assumed I was a girl. I didn't make them think that. But you didn't correct them.
No.
Mom took over. "Did anything sexual happen between you and Ashley?"
No.
"Did you wear women's clothes?" I stared at her. For a moment, I almost expected her to start recording the conversation, so she would have evidence of every answer. "I wore clothes that girls wear. But jeans are worn by everyone." Mom frowned. "Why didn't you tell them you were a boy?" "Because strangers make the same mistake all the time. Correcting them is embarrassing." "And when you went shopping with Ashley, did you actually try on girls' clothes?" I hesitated. "Yes." "Did you enjoy it?" "Yes." The moment the word left my mouth, I regretted it. Mom's expression changed instantly. "You could have caused serious problems for yourself. Wearing women's clothes isn't illegal." "That's not what I'm talking about. If you had caused a disturbance, you could have ended up in trouble. And imagine what that would have meant if you'd been brought into the station where I work." "I'm sorry." Dad looked at me. "But don't you understand what this could do to your future?" I said nothing. "You're popular at school.
You're on the football team."
You're doing well academically and you're excellent with computers."
He paused.
"Do you really want to risk all of that?"
No.
"Your exams are only a few months away. I want you concentrating on them. From now on, come straight home after school. Football matches are the exception." "How long?" "Until Christmas." I nodded. At least there was an end date. Then Dad added something that immediately made my stomach twist. "There's one more thing." "What?" "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson have asked us to make sure you don't see Ashley anymore."
My heart sank.
"Why?" "They say they're worried you're a bad influence on her." Dad paused. "Personally, I suspect they're more upset that they were deceived." I looked down. "They don't seem to know that you two talk online." My parents left. I moved toward the window and stared at the streetlights outside. Life felt unbelievably unfair. It wasn't my fault strangers assumed I was a girl. But that wasn't even what hurt most. What really hurt was knowing I'd disappointed my parents. They had trusted me with a lot of freedom. Now that freedom was gone. I returned to my computer and opened the instant messenger. Ashley wasn't online. I waited. Nothing. As bedtime approached, she still hadn't appeared. I decided to stay up a little longer and work on some of the physics topics we'd been discussing, planets, stars, and space. But every few minutes, I checked the messenger window again. Nothing. Eventually, Mom knocked on my door. "Did she come online?"
No.
My voice cracked slightly. Mom opened the door. "Can I come in?"
Sure. She
She stepped inside. "If she doesn't appear this weekend, send her a text Monday." Her parents may take her phone away, but I doubt they'll stop her taking it to school. Then she pointed toward my bed. Now get some sleep. We have things to do tomorrow. I reluctantly shut down the computer, watching the messenger window disappear. Mom gave me a small smile. I know it sounds harsh, but the sooner you sleep, the sooner morning arrives. Then you'll have another chance to see if Ashley comes online. She paused. And don't go to the hockey match tomorrow. It's probably best to give Mrs. Thompson some time to calm down. Mom left. I could hear my parents quietly talking in their bedroom, and I wondered whether they were discussing me. Sleep came in fragments. Whenever I managed to drift off, I woke again with tears, confusion, and a deep sense of loss. At 6 the next morning, I switched on my computer. While it booted, I checked my phone. Nothing. There was no message. No email. Ashley wasn't online. I sat there staring at the screen until the tears returned. I was glad Dad wasn't around to see me like that. He wouldn't have understood. At breakfast, I barely touched my food. Dad insisted I eat something. Both of my parents seemed sympathetic, but I couldn't help wondering whether they'd ever experienced anything remotely like this when they were younger.
Hurry up, Mom said.
We'll be late. Late for what? We're going out. Dad was going shopping while Mom took me somewhere. Now eat and make sure you brush your teeth properly. Yes, Mom. After a little encouragement, I got ready. I had no idea where we were going. Then we stopped outside the doctor's surgery. I stared at the building. I hadn't been there in years. Mom walked to reception. I'd like an appointment with Dr. Roberts, please. Is that for you or your daughter? Mom glanced at me. I shrugged. Actually, it's for my son. She gave the receptionist my details, and within moments my medical record was on the screen. Please take a seat. The waiting room wasn't particularly busy, so we found a quiet corner. I looked at Mom. Is it always like that? When people don't know me? She nodded. You saw how embarrassed she was when she realized she'd made a mistake. That's why I usually don't correct them. We didn't have to wait long before our names were called. Dr. Roberts greeted us. What can I do for you today? I wasn't sure why we'd come, so I let Mom explain. Richard is 16 and hasn't started puberty yet. We'd like to know if there's a medical reason. He had surgery for testicular torsion when he was 10, and I'm concerned that might have affected him. I looked at Mom with renewed appreciation. I'd almost forgotten about that operation. Dr. Roberts studied my records. 16 is a little outside the usual range, but that doesn't necessarily mean there's anything wrong. He turned toward his computer. Let's see, here we are. You had a bilateral orchidopexy.
He looked at me.
Richard, have you experienced any pain since the operation?
No.
Good.
He leaned back.
Let's see whether there's anything preventing puberty from beginning normally. I'll need to perform an examination. He paused. Because you're under 18, I'll need another adult present. Would you prefer your mother or one of our nurses? For one ridiculous second, I thought of Ashley. Probably a nurse. I looked at Mom. Sorry. Dr. Roberts picked up the phone and asked the practice nurse to come in. While we waited for the nurse, Dr. Roberts glanced at me with a faint smile. So, who's Ashley? She was my girlfriend until yesterday. He raised an eyebrow. Until yesterday? Her parents found out I wasn't a girl. They weren't very happy about it. He smiled knowingly. I imagine they were especially unhappy if their daughter had been allowed into her bedroom because they thought you were a girl. Before I could answer, the nurse arrived. I disappeared behind the privacy curtain while they prepared the examination. When I was ready, I called for them, and the doctor and nurse came over. The examination was brief. There was some prodding and checking, but nothing particularly painful or dramatic. A few minutes later, I was told I could get dressed. When I returned to my seat, the nurse had already left. Everything appears to be normal, Dr. Roberts said. However, I'd like to check your hormone levels. You'll need to have some blood tests. He handed Mom a form along with information about several places where the tests could be done. Make another appointment with me in about 3 weeks. Mom looked over the list. Is anywhere able to do the blood tests today? There's a hospital nearby. Then that's where we're going. At the hospital, I took a ticket and sat beside Mom in the waiting area. About an hour later, my number appeared. We went through to the treatment area. Hello, ladies, the nurse said cheerfully. Which one am I seeing?